Abu Dhabi, you have your main event. Islam Makhachev will be defending his lightweight title versus Charles Oliveira at UFC 294 on October 21st. Fresh off his win over Beneil Dariush last month, Chucky Olives now gets another crack at Makhachev. Paulo Costa and Khamzat Chimaev will tangle in the co-main event, in case you're wondering. The UFC has partners in Abu Dhabi, guys. So they usually like delivering for them and stocking those yearly cards when they come to town. In your eyes, did the UFC nail it or nah? Danny, you go first.
They did, considering the scenario that they were presented in, because there were no other options, or at least options that made sense. There was a few names thrown out there, Volkanovski being one of them, which obviously I would love to see that fight at some point, but I would hate for the first two title defenses of the lightweight champion to be against a non-lightweight, against the 45 champion. That doesn't make any sense to me. The winner of Poirier versus Gagey, which we will see this Saturday, that sounds nice, but we know how their first fight went, plus their history. So we know they're going to take some damage in that fight. I mean, it is the BMF title fight for a reason. And you just start looking around at what's left at 155, and there's really no clear opponent for Islam Makhachev. That name, I think, should have been Beneil Dariush. They should have saved him for a title fight. It would have felt big. It would have felt like, hey, look, a deserving contender in a lengthy win streak. We only have Charles Oliveira coming off a single win since losing to Islam Makhachev, so that's not ideal. But they end up booking that fight, and the winner was Charles Oliveira. So at the end of the day, given the current circumstance which the UFC found themselves in, I think this is the best scenario. And I'm actually a bit surprised. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I've seen a lot of enthusiasm about this fight and still a lot of doubt on who will the winner be, despite literally watching this fight a year ago and having a clear dominant win for Islam Makhachev. It just seems that Charles Oliveira, now I believe he's called Illuminated Charles Oliveira. That's what's going on online. A lot of people still have high hopes for him. A lot of people still think he can get the job done enough to cause a lot of buzz, a lot of interest in this title fight. So I do think this is the best option the UFC had, given the current circumstances.
All right, Fada, I know you'll be there to cover the event for us. What do you think? Did this make a good enough splash for your neck of the woods?
Yeah, this is the thing. So I agree with Danny in the sense that they had no real choice because Volkanovski's coming off of surgery. He said he'll be ready, but we can't guarantee that. And then you've got Gaethje. I just listened to an interview that he did with CBS Sports, and he was saying 0% chance I probably would have turned around if I beat Dustin Poirier. We both know that those guys get into a car crash type of fight. So with tickets going on sale and stuff, they kind of needed a fight. So waiting on either Volkanovski to be healthy or an outcome between Gaethje and Poirier where we know we're kind of guaranteed a war, it's kind of tough to rely on that. So I'm not against it. And at the end of the day, Oliveira has wins over the entire top five, being Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and Beneil Dariush. So when you look at it that way, he deserves that rematch. It's just my only question is, and it's probably something that I would want to ask fans in Abu Dhabi maybe once I touch down, is their enthusiasm level, because like Danny said, we just had this fight a year ago and it was a pretty dominant showing for Islam Makhachev. So that's kind of what I want to ask, if perhaps are the people that are buying tickets for this, is the enthusiasm level the same, getting the exact same main event, or is it just about, we get to see Islam Makhachev compete? Now, don't forget, this was the worst case scenario for Charles Oliveira last year. I feel like it couldn't have gone worse for him. So there is that idea to think that he probably will do better than he did last year. So in that regard, so I'm a bit kind of 50-50 about it, but I understand why the UFC went with it. And I'm not saying that Oliveira doesn't deserve another shot. It's just the way he lost last year. I can understand why it could be a tiny bit of a hard sell for fans that are buying tickets.
All right. And goes, let's get your take. But before that, let me also sprinkle this in. We interviewed Charles Oliveira at the UFC Fight Expo. He showed no interest in going to Abu Dhabi. In fact, he didn't want to fight in October. He said maybe November or December. And you could just see his body language because he had probably been asked this question all over Radio Row, but he really wanted to get the message across. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So that, and along with taking Costa off UFC 291 and putting him on this card, for me, it just didn't have that impact. How about you?
That's an interesting way of looking at it. You're right. And as Danny and Farah brought it up, it's kind of interesting. I would want to see how people react to it on that side of the world because even though on paper, yeah, it's a great matchup, we did just see it. I wonder if they were kind of hoping to see something different. The matchup itself is really interesting because you have a guy like Charles Oliveira who obviously has a lot to prove, right? Coming into this fight, there's a lot for him to prove. But on the other side, you have a guy coming in off of a win who feels like he's got a lot to prove, right? People are saying he was pushed to the limits by a 145er. So both guys are going to be coming in with, I think, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I got to give Charles Oliveira props for taking this fight. You're right, George. He did not look like he was interested in this time frame at all. He did it. He's going back to the scene of the crime where this happened the first time, which I have to imagine is pretty tough to do for a fighter to go out there and just kind of relive where one of your biggest mistakes happened in front of millions and millions of people. Sometimes that reset of a different venue, different opponent kind of helps, but the dude earned it, Beneil Dariush, that is no cupcake. That is a tough fight. He went in and he got the finish. He earned everybody's respect. And then you add on this co-main event to this card. I'm more on the side of they nailed it than I am. Nah.
Okay. Well, let's do some follow-ups here. And I want to welcome the audience on Facebook. Here comes one from Facebook, Michael Lawrence. He says, I hate no one talks about Charles' mental state coming into the fight last year. That wasn't the Oliveira we're used to seeing. This time around, I believe he'll be ready on all fronts and takes the title back. I guess, Fada, can I go back to you? I mean, you covered the event. You probably saw him more than anybody. Is Michael Lawrence kind of on to something? I don't remember all this happening about a year ago, did it?
Honestly, he looked confident, but then again, fighters don't always show what's going on behind the scenes. So in terms of media day and his attitude, I was around his team quite a bit as well, talked to his coach as well, Diego Lima. No, they were oozing confidence heading into this matchup. There was I felt like kind of like a fire from Charles Oliveira. I don't know in the sense of if he felt like they were being underestimated or what exactly. But again, like I said, behind the scenes is a completely different thing. But somebody brought this up in the comments as well, something to do. Yeah, only if he, Michael Lawrence as well, only if he's actually healthy. Yeah, that's another point, right? Because he just, said that he might not be ready to go for October. And it seemed like that was the stories that we were all writing that, okay, who's next? Because Oliveira's not ready. And all of a sudden he's in this fight. So, yeah, I don't know if he's 100% healthy. I really hope he is. And then again, we're talking about the mental state. If he was just a few moments ago saying he wasn't going to be ready for October and all of a sudden he's fighting, I don't know. But either way, does he have the skills to make this a great fight? Absolutely. We just, like I said, we didn't see any of that. And that's credit to Islam Makhachev, of course. But because I feel like that was kind of the worst case scenario, if Charles Oliveira looks at it like that, like, all right, that was the worst I had, I still have a lot to show Islam Makhachev. We could get an exciting fight, that's for sure. Especially maybe that he's not looking at Islam as invincible after that close fight with Volkanovski.
Dixon in the chat. I'm not gonna fall for it, Dixon. He says it's a weak card. Here's the rest of it. To be fair, Nasruddin Imavov against Ikram Aliskerov, and then there's I believe Muhammad Mokayev against Tim Elliott, plus the other two that I mentioned. If you're just joining the show, Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira, main event. Paulo Costa versus Khamzat Chimaev, co-main event for UFC 294, October 31st, Abu Dhabi. Yeah, tickets had to go on sale, so that's what they gave us for to start off. And I guess it's not so bad. Look, they'll probably stock it with some more talent. But again, I think some of at least what I'm feeling had to do with that conversation we had with Charles. I mean, Charles was so blunt. He even said, if they give it to someone else, I'll get the winner. I was like, wow, he's really passing things up. He must be hiding something, or he just doesn't want to get into another weight camp and have to go through another weight cut. Fight camp, I should say, in a weight cut. And I don't know, kind of shocked me to tell you the truth. Maybe they just added a zero to that paycheck, though.
Yeah.
But fight night, George, you're gonna have goosebumps, and especially when you add in all the little storylines that go into it, right? Like if Charles loses this fight, he's in no man's land, right? That's 2 losses to that guy. And let's be honest, in the past, Charles Oliveira is kind of hard to match up. A lot of people don't want to fight him. So if they don't have to, I think they try and avoid him. And then when you think about it, like that fight that everybody wants to see again, Alexander Volkanovski, that if Charles Oliveira wins this fight, like we get further and farther from maybe seeing that fight. I don't know. Like it's such a weird thing, but I think come fight night, we're all going to have the goosebumps, man. I think it's going to be a good fight. I think overall it's a pretty solid card.
Okay. One more. Keep them coming. These are some good ones here. JD Realty YT says, question for the panel. When have you seen Charles start a fight with a jumping switch kick from miles away? The moment got to him. That won't happen this time around. Did you guys kind of see that? Maybe nerves? Forget about preparation, injuries, just maybe nerves. I mean, he was going up against the guy that everybody said is Habib 2.0, and that's pretty much a scary proposition.
As far as the kick goes, I think he was just trying to get a feel for what a lot of Charles Oliveira, and I think there are things you can point to that maybe it just wasn't his night. But who's to say that doesn't happen a second time around, right? Like that's just part of fighting. It's what happens. Every fighter goes through it at some point.